Hello, I'm Dr. Gerald Lewis. The title of this talk is a very serious one, and that's Cancer, Lessons from Both Ends of the Stethoscope, and the meaning of that last sentence will come up quite shortly. First of all, why am I qualified to talk upon cancer? Essentially, I'm a cardiologist and a general physician, which means I've been treating patients with most forms of disease, including cancer, for most of my medical career. I've worked in hospitals in Christchurch and in Napier. And I've been exposed to conventional medicine, including cancer, throughout my 40 years of medical career. I've also worked at the Centre for Advanced Medicine in Auckland, where we gave intravenous chelation and intravenous vitamin C, the latter particularly for patients with cancer. And at the Centre for Advanced Medicine, I had a lot of experience seeing and treating cancer patients. I also had the real privilege of visiting Dr. Hugh Riordan in the Bright Spot for Health in Wichita. Hugh Riordan sadly has died since I saw him. He is one of the world authorities on the complementary treatment of cancer, particularly the intravenous therapy for cancer, and it was a real privilege to have met him. And he'd used not only intravenous vitamin C, but other treatments for cancer as well. My wife Monica, that's Monica and myself there, we wrote a book some years ago called Cancer, A Threat to Your Life or a Chance to Take Control of Your Future. Now the last part of the title was in fact Monica's. That's the book over there on the right hand side, and you can get this on the web if you want to. I didn't really think a huge deal about that title until later on, when I suddenly realized just how truthful in fact that title really was. Then, suddenly in 2014, I was lifting a very heavy desk and I hurt my back. Then I noticed, bending over, tying a shoelace, I cracked a rib. And then I was leaning over the gear lift of my car, picking up something from the passenger side, and again I broke another rib. So I had a broken back and 2 broken ribs. So I thought it's time to have a blood test, so I had a blood test. This showed that the inflammatory markers, the ESR and CRP, were very high and all was not well. So I then did the serum proteins, and that showed, this is the serum proteins, which are the proteins, the immunoglobulins and proteins in the blood associated with the immune system. They're supposed to look like that, but in fact this is what mine looked like. They had this M spike where in fact there should be nothing at all. And that is the diagnosis of multiple myeloma, which is a cancer of the plasma or the immune cells inside the bones. All of our immune cells, or many of our immune cells, are kept inside the bones, and the plasma cells normally sit there in all the bones all over the body. And with multiple myeloma, the plasma cells start multiplying out of control, and in particular the little wee Y-shaped things called light chains also come off as well, and they start filling up, and it starts taking over the bone and then the other tissues of the body. So I saw a doctor at the Mercy Hospital, which is a private hospital, and she basically, like a first 5'8", immediately passed the ball on to a haematologist as fast as she possibly could. The reason I'm mentioning this is she said to me as I worked out the door, I want you to see him as fast as possible. I don't want a paraplegic on my watch. So I went to the North Shore Haematology Department in New Zealand and had received what I consider to be superb service. I had an MRI scan which showed multiple fractures, but also multiple areas in the bone that was involved. And then I had an X-ray, and that in fact showed these holes all throughout, all the bones throughout the body. And that's what they look like on the X-ray, little holes. Basically what happens is the plasma cells start taking over and they replace the bone marrow. And they're on the left arm over there. Now that one on the left arm in fact had the oncologist rather worried, because in fact that was not bone, but that was just simply plasma tissue and completely weak. So within 24 hours I was in the hand of the orthopedic surgeon, who hammered this rod down to my left arm, and it's been relatively solid ever since. I then had some more bloods and bone marrow to confirm the diagnosis, and they came up with the diagnosis that it was a very aggressive form of myeloma, and obviously I needed treatment fast before I didn't have any bones left in my body. Now this was obviously not a time to eat wheatgrass and meditate. I needed to kill these plasma cells as fast as possible before they killed me. Unfortunately for myeloma, it's incurable. all we can do is simply slow it down. There was no form of surgery that was effective for this because obviously it was everywhere. You could do radiotherapy for individual lesions in the back, for example, to strengthen the back. Chemotherapy tended to be the old-fashioned drugs, myelin, cyclophosphamide, steroids, and some newer ones called Velcade, thalidomide, lenalidomide, and other similar drugs like that. And the answer was that I needed chemotherapy, and that's what I was offered. Then I was asked, well, do I want to participate in a trial that they're doing? Because new drugs coming around, people always need to participate in trials to see whether they're working or not. So the question was, do I or do I not participate in a chemotherapy trial? First of all, I read the protocol very carefully. Now, it's important to realize that these trials, you never get paid for them, and I think that's the way it undoubtedly should be. They provide medical cover, etc., but essentially you receive one treatment or another treatment. There are two types of drugs being trialed. There are two types. First of all, there's a new form of a drug which gives real possible benefit to humanity. These new drugs are drugs that haven't been available before. They're obviously quite a considerably greater risk, and the side effects to some extent are unknown, although they do tend to try and do as many tests as they can before they give it to humans. The second group of drugs is a Me Too drug, which is essentially another drug firm trying to get a slice of the action. They have seen a drug which works, they've made a drug which is similar, and they want to compare the two. There are very set protocols that you need to be followed, and you're not allowed to vary from the protocol variations. They usually do a lot more tests than the usual care ones, and they tend to discourage the use of other agents, such as complementary therapies, which could alter the results. If a whole lot of people took complementary therapy in one and not in the other one, then it could vary the results with nothing to do with the drug at all. Now, I was offered a Me Too drug for Velcade. I also wanted to use complementary therapy, so I decided against participating in the trial. But then I went on a fairly rapid research and learning curve. The medical literature was rather depressing. I looked at the side effects from the drug, the life expectancy, the causes of death, which wasn't very uplifting at all. There are a number of sites on the internet, particularly the Myeloma Beacon, which was very helpful in people talking about myeloma. You can get reports called MOS reports, which are very comprehensive, quite generic, but they're very up to date with treatments. And essentially what you do is you write for a MOS report, which you can Google. It costs $300 per cancer, and they send you the results of their recommendations or the treatment available for that particular cancer. And of course the hospitals produce brochures, booklets, etc. Multiple myeloma is, as I said, incurable. The life expectancy is anything between 6 and 36 months. Now, I was diagnosed 36 months ago. Drugs, which suppress the plants, act by suppressing the plasma and the immune cells. First of all, there's old-time chemotherapy, which destroys most cells, but tends to affect the fastest growing cells. And the ones we tend to use are cyclophosphamide and Myloran. Now, they were available when Monica and I actually graduated from medical school in 1967, and they haven't changed since then. And they were derived, somewhat depressingly, from nitrogen mustard gas. They found that people who survived nitrogen mustard gas had low white cells, and the main treatment happened when they in fact a crash of a train containing nitrogen mustard gas, and the pollution around the area. People around there had low white cells, and people thought, well, that may possibly be a way of treating immune diseases and leukemias, which in fact is what's happened. So they've been used for lymphoma, leukemia and myeloma. The side effects, they destroy cells and then destroy the cancer cells as well. But there are newer drugs. Velcade, which is something called a proteasome inhibitor, and these days there are much more specific, both immune and targeted forms of drugs. Proteases break down old cells into the new. Proteases are enzymes inside the cells which break down old cells. Basically, in our cells get proteins get old and they're replaced. What happens is the Velcade stops the proteases working, so the proteins build up inside the cell, which eventually explodes. Rather a depressing thought, but fortunately it only tends to occur mostly in the immune cells, and that's how Velcade works. There are other drugs, high-dose steroids, thalidomide, lenalidomide. So speed was fairly crucial before I crumbled or became infected or developed renal failure, so I had started on Velcade weekly injections. Cost $1,800 per injection, maximum of 9 treatments. The injection was once a week for 9 months, so that is a cost of $64,000 to the New Zealand taxpayer, and I was very grateful. I was then put on 12 tablets of cyclophosphamide on Monday, 10 tablets of dexamethasone on Monday, plus cotrimoxazole, which is an antibiotic to prevent an infection in the lung. Allopurinol to stop me getting gout, acyclovir to prevent getting shingles, and monthly I had an infusion of Iridia to strengthen my bones. And then I also took quite a number of supplements, which I'll talk about in a minute or two. And as you can see, I was having a fairly impressive number of pills and supplements every day. It was also recommended that I should make a diary. My friends said, oh, you should write a diary. See, so you know how you're getting on. To me, I thought this was, after my experience, a somewhat stupid affair. I started off with the chemotherapy, felt sick. The next day, felt sicker. The fingers are starting to feel numb. Now the toes and feet. Now my feet are starting to hurt. Food tastes like metal. My mouth tastes like an ashtray. I feel nauseated. I've got no appetite. I've got no taste, no smell. Eyes are dry. My mouth, every time I stood up, I felt dizzy. My vision was blurred, and I had crashing fatigue. I didn't find that filling in a diary at all when I was having chemotherapy was uplifting. In actual fact, all it did is emphasize things that I was trying to ignore. But it did open my eyes to the little and the big things that happen with chemotherapy, so I wrote a book, Coping with Chemotherapy, and it looks at the various side effects of chemotherapy and how they can be helped, both from my experience as a patient and also my experience as a doctor. Because simple things can make a real difference. For example, if you wear socks in bed or keep your feet cool, either warm or cool, it helps the pain in bed at night. Often your vision is affected, and buying cheap glasses help the effect on vision. Rather than buying expensive glasses, just go to the chemist or the supermarket and buy some cheap glasses that work, just to tide you over so you can continue to read while you're having chemo. If the food is very metallic and horrible feeling, sometimes using plastic spoons and forks can help. When you stand up slowly, hold on for a minute after you're getting up, and then move off rather than trying to move too quickly, because you can make you feel giddy and dizzy. Eye drops for dry eyes. If you've got fatigue, coenzyme Q10, and sometimes if you vary the amount of steroids, it can also make a difference. After 6 months of treatment, the M-Man was undetectable, but I developed diabetes, so I decided to stop taking steroids. The question is why continue? The Velcade had stopped the protein breakdown in the dividing cells, but my cells weren't dividing, so it did seem a bit pointless taking them. All I was doing was just thrashing my good cells and maybe making them explode. I felt horrible, so I asked if I could try taking complementary therapies such as turmeric. And curcumin does. There's good evidence, in fact, that curcumin, which is in turmeric, is beneficial for cancer. Fish oils, again, studies showing fish oils are beneficial, and antioxidants also make a significant difference. So I started taking those. At 8 months, I still had no detectable M-band on my serum protein blood test. 8 months, still no detectable band. Then 10 months, a small band had recurred again. So the plan was another course of Velcade before my pharmac regulations expired. I was also taking curcumin, salvestrol. I wondered about taking CBD oil, which is a form of oil coming from marijuana, but I elected not to do that. Lenalidomide, thalidomide, and steroids, and possibly later intravenous vitamin C. And all the while, I was taking good supplements to keep my body and my immune system as strong and working as well as possible. I think it was important to make sure the supplements I was taking were good quality, because if they're not good quality, you may as well not take them. A good multi, calcium and magnesium, fish oils in high doses, grapeseed extract to reduce the inflammation and free radicals, coenzyme Q10 to give me more energy, vitamin D, which is important for all cancers. And I've written another little booklet called An All-Inclusive Approach to Cancer, which basically reviews these and all the other treatments that I can find for treating cancer. And again, that's available. 2 years after the diagnosis, no detectable myeloma band. So my thoughts from the other end of the stethoscope. First of all, don't make stupid remarks. This doctor who said to me, passed me on, I don't want a paraplegic on my watch. It may sound clever and it's witty, but it's frightening. Every tinge of pain in the legs suddenly becomes important. Am I going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life? Because those symptoms always occur with peripheral neuropathy. You always get pins and needles in the legs. Dare I bend or twist or even sneeze? I think it's important that doctors think hard before making any prognostic comments like that. Don't throw away conventional medicine. People often read all sorts of things. For example, this paper in Clinical Oncology by two, they're radiologists, Australian radiologists. The contribution of cytotoxic chemotherapy to the 5-year survival is not very great. What it says is that the overall contribution of cytotoxic chemotherapy to survival was only about 2.3 to 2.1% in Australia and the United States, suggesting that chemotherapy didn't make much difference at all. However, that is the older form of chemotherapy, not the newer form of chemotherapy. In many cases, chemotherapy do make little difference to the outlook, and they can destroy the quality of life. But there are some cancers where chemo is marvellously effective, such as an anal cancer, testicular cancer, lymphoma, melanoma, myeloma, leukemia, some forms of lung cancers, childhood cancers, and the numbers increasing. So it's important to ask your oncologist, and also have a look at the web. Some of the newer agents, such as immunotherapy and target therapy, work brilliantly well, but they're incredibly expensive. Recent research has shown that we've actually been barking possibly down the wrong path with treatments and causes of cancer. What happens is inflammation and toxins, etc., turn on the genes which can cause the cancer. These are called oncogenes. So there's a normal cell at the top, and two pathways are affected by toxins, etc., and that's called NF-kappa B, and STAT3. And those two there turn a normal cell into a cancer cell. And that cancer cell is the oncogene, and that is essentially the stem cell that causes the cancer. The first mutated stem cells seem to be in charge of the cancer process. Now, conventional chemotherapy kills the daughter cells around the outside of the stem cells, but it doesn't seem to kill the cancer cells, which is why in many cases cancer comes back again, because the stem cells are still there. But they found that some natural polyphenol compounds can actually kill the stem cells as well as the daughter cells. And these include a whole lot of ones which I don't want to try and pronounce, but resveratrol, curcumin, and quercetin are the ones that I think we need to concentrate on, particularly resveratrol and curcumin. They can actually destroy turn off NF-kappa B and STAT3, and they can also kill the cancer stem cells. So if you have chemotherapy affecting the daughter cells, and these drugs, these supplements affecting the cancer stem cells as well, you get the best possible effect from both. Do your research. Now, I looked at the Moss report. It's expensive. It's a bit repetitive. I think each one is very similar, but they do specifically look at every cancer. I think it's worthwhile for an individual. It's $300 a disease for every form of cancer. They read extensively. It's important that you do your search, read extensively, ask for a second opinion, and also look at the complementary approaches that are available as well. Also make sure that the treatments or the supplements or whatever complementary treatment you're having doesn't affect conventional chemotherapy and radiotherapy, because it sometimes can. For example, many chemo drugs and radiotherapy attack the most rapidly dividing cells. And those most rapidly dividing cells are usually the cancer cells. Now, if a complementary therapy, such as intravenous vitamin C, damages the cancer cells and slows down their division, then they won't be multiplying as fast, and they won't be damaged nearly as much by the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy. In fact, the normal cells may well be dividing faster than the cancer cells. So it could result in more side effects and less effectiveness. So it's important to think about things like that and discuss with your oncologist what you're taking. I think for vitamin C, I recommend it be given before chemotherapy starts, or before radiotherapy starts, and afterwards, but not during the treatment course. Now, there are some very effective complementary anti-cancer therapies: curcumin, melatonin, salvestral, intravenous vitamin C, green tea, vitamin D, meditation, mind-body approaches. It's important to use those well. And again, it's all mentioned in this little book of mine. Chemotherapy is horrible. I didn't realize the crashing exhaustion, the neuropathy, which is the pins and needles and pains in the fingers and the legs. Does it ever stop? I'm not certain. The autonomic effects are huge. Now, the autonomic basically is the nervous system that affects things that we have no control over. Our sight. People often, their vision is poor, so they may need a change of glasses. Hypotension, blood pressure dropping when you stand up. It affects your taste, nausea. Brain fog's important. Don't make any major decisions if you're having chemotherapy, because sometimes it can affect your brain function. It affects the skin, the nails, the hair, the gut and the bowels. So when you're having chemotherapy, take time out and rest when you're feeling tired. However, it is very important, if you possibly can, to do some mild exercise. For doctors, be sympathetic for your family, with your patients. Even if they don't look bad, they feel yuck. And again, I've written a book, Coping with Chemo, that you might find helpful. Some people suggest that marijuana can possibly help with that as well, and in this country there's a big push towards giving marijuana or making medical marijuana available, because it certainly can help with the side effects of chemotherapy. This was for a lecture, and this was essentially when people started to go to sleep. I thought a headline like that would be waking up for them. When I was working in Napier Hospital, a nurse rushed to my office and said, "Doctor, doctor, come quickly." So we raced along to the patient, and she said, "Mr. Smith has got into bed with Mrs. Smith." And in hospitals, we've actually forgotten the power of love and touch and hugging. I think, and many people believe, that hospitals should actually have private cuddle rooms. Wayne Thomas, MD, Dr. Wayne Thomas, MD, has done a lot of work with this, and he says touch is one of the great untapped healing secrets of our society. A cuddle hormone, oxytocin, creates feelings of calmness, eases depression, reduces stress, increases immunity, and helps the body to repair, to heal, and restore itself faster. Touching, holding, skin contact are all very, very powerful therapies. Now, most patients don't feel like outright sex, but intimacy is very and hugely important and should not be ignored. If people on chemotherapy do have sex, it's important to discuss lubrication, because that's often affected by chemotherapy. Thrush infections can occur more easily because the immune system is affected, and also use a condom, as the semen can actually contain some chemotherapy drugs. Many patients ask, why me? I take excellent supplements, I eat well, I've never smoked, I don't drink excessively, I'm not overweight, I do some exercise. It's nice to have a non-blaming answer if possible, and in my case I was exposed to quite a lot of radiation in the cardiac cath lab when I was doing my postgraduate training in the UK. We didn't realise how radiation was quite as bad as it was, and that's probably the reason why I had myeloma, because excess radiation is a major cause of myeloma. But for most people, it's unlikely to have an obvious cause. The important thing is, don't search too hard for it. Certainly don't blame yourself, and don't blame yourself, and don't blame your spouse, and don't let your spouse feel blamed either. Telling a family is important. It's not easy, and I found it was easier to tell each member of the family one at a time, starting with my spouse. I think it's best when you start talking about cancer, it's reasonably important to cut to the chase fast. If you sort of spar around, people start thinking worse things worse than they are, which is often worse than it really is. So it's pretty important when you start talking. Tell them about the diagnosis fairly quickly. Be open, but give hope. Don't ever give a time span, because nobody ever does. Patients often ask us as doctors, how long have I got? We have no idea, particularly with modern treatments and complementary therapies. Do it yourself if possible. Don't let others do it, particularly if your own family. It's even harder with the grandchildren. I think it's best just to say you've got a sore back or something, and let the parents decide how much they're going to share with them. But be open. Talk about the illnesses and treatment and outlook, and always be open with the family. And if something happens, if you get relapse, tell them. They get very brassed off, in actual fact, if things start getting worse and they haven't been told. And a very important thing, particularly for spouses, is don't hide symptoms, because eventually they'll know, and then they're going to watch you for any signs of pain. So basically, with your spouse, if you have any symptoms, don't become utterly neurotic, of course, but tell them if something's happened. Tell you if you've got symptoms, rather than hide them, because it's much easier for them to rely on you telling them rather than having to watch you all the time just to see if you're hiding any symptoms. It's important for doctors and everybody to remember the partner. He or she is under huge stress. They're trying to support the patient while at the same time they've got the fear that they might lose you. There's a helplessness during chemotherapy and operations which they can't do anything about. There's insecurity, uncertainty for the future. They watch you for any symptoms, so as I said before, be open and promise that you'll tell. Take your partner to the doctor and the oncology visits so that they know exactly what's going on as well, and they can ask all the questions that they want to ask. Talk openly about your feelings, your fears, your needs, and it can actually be a very special time for both of you. As a health professional, ask the spouse if she or he has any questions or concerns. It's important for the doctor to actually talk to the spouse rather than just the patients, and give them a contact number, the oncology nurse, if they're concerned. Openly discuss death. We're all going to die at some stage, and with cancer, there's time to prepare, discuss funerals without being macabre. We've written a cancer book, A Threat to Your Life, and a chance to take control of your future, and that now makes sense because there are so many things we can now do to control the disease and its symptoms. We have a chance of taking control. Now, as a cardiologist, I've met many of my cardiac patients who just suddenly collapse and they drop dead without any warning. This is so hard on the spouse and the family. With cancer, there's time to talk, to prepare, to plan, have a holiday. But the important thing is to give you a chance of having quality of life and quality time with your family and your partners. Write a letter to your partner and all of your children and leave it with your lawyer. I've written a paper called Where's Wally, which gives all the details of the bank, the shares, the files, the lawyers, etc. And that's once again at the lawyers sorting out the finances, the wills, the mortgages, etc. You've got time to do all of that. Death's something that I think everybody needs to think about. We're all going to die, and we need to get rid of the fear. I must confess I'm an extremely simple person, and I don't see any reason of being any less than simple, because I think there are only three alternatives with death. One, it's like going to sleep and you don't wake up. Well, that shouldn't be scary. Number two is there is an afterlife, and I don't honestly believe that a God who made this wonderful world would create anything other than paradise. And number three is reincarnation. Well, I don't remember the last one, so why should I be frightened of the next one? And so therefore death to me is nothing to be frightened about. But talk it over with a spouse, a friend, a counsellor, or a pastor. Don't try and convert somebody, especially if that person is at peace with themselves. For most people, the process of dying is actually the greatest fear, and that fear needs to be alleviated. Pain can always be controlled, even if it means breaking the law with marijuana or something like that. It's important that we help people with sleep. Don't worry about drugs, becoming dependent on drugs. If you have pain, then you don't become dependent on drugs. If you need to take a drug, you don't tend to become dependent on it. And hospices and hospice at home can always give peace and pain control. Don't fight. Allow the drugs to work if it's necessary. So stop the fear of dying, the pain. If you can do that, it can easily be controlled, even if it doesn't include breaking the law. And euthanasia is practiced, I suspect, quite a lot more than we suspect, but I don't think this is something we need to consider. Carpe diem, seize the day, enjoy every day. See and enjoy the beauty of nature and the world. Suddenly, when you realize your mortality, you suddenly appreciate the beauty of nature and the world. Be positive, be happy, forgive and forget. It's terribly important to forgive. Don't talk about cancer being the same as you've always been. A lot of people, in fact, spend all of their time talking about their illness, particularly their cancer, and their life circles around that. Don't do that. Try and be as normal as possible and enjoy life. Plan your days. Make time to appreciate and be grateful. Consider having a dog. Not sure about a cat. I'm not certain. I've never been keen on cats, but certainly we've got a little dog, Billy, down there, who's really been an incredible support to me. Have a bucket list. Trips around the country or overseas, cruise. Plan for the long-term future. We've actually moved house. We've moved down to Lake Taupo, which is there. We have a lovely house there. We're loving it there. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm feeling so well. We've taken my goddaughter and his brother on a cruise. We've been to Europe and had a fabulous cruise around Europe. And we've also had a holiday in Fiji. So we're basically enjoying life. And that's the important thing. Enjoy life. The importance of friends. It's important to strengthen our mind, which is possibly the most powerful treatment we've got. I think most of us have heard of the Aboriginal bone ceremony, where the leader, if somebody has committed a crime and they have been decided that they should be put to death, the leader paints himself in white. He points a bone at the condemned man. The man is isolated from the tribe. The tribe turn their back on the person who, even though was previously perfectly healthy and well, and in a few days the man dies, simply because of isolation and being turned back. Now, tragically, this happens almost every day with cancer patients. A man in a white coat and a stick, stethoscope, gives a diagnosis. Friends don't know what to say, so they stay away. The patient feels alone and isolated, and then, obviously, what happens is they deteriorate. Treat a cancer patient just like the friend that he or she was before the diagnosis was made. Talk about life, talk about family, talk about friends, and listen. But above all, simply just be there. Loneliness is a terribly, terribly negative effect on life. And don't always talk about cancer. In fact, try and ignore cancer if you can. Now, am I sad I've developed cancer? Of course I am. It's unlikely that I'm going to see my great-grandchildren. But I'm taking a whole new look at life and the world, squeezing fun, family and friends as never before, looking at my future, planning for a long-term illness, creating a bucket list which I plan to empty, appreciating much more what my patients have got to go through. I've realized the importance of emotion, family, and the little things that make up life. I'm now writing a new cancer book, which includes my experiences from my disease rather than just simply what I learnt or thought I knew beforehand when I wrote the first cancer book. Always being grateful for having time to appreciate, to plan, and to enjoy. We have time. With cancer, you have time. So, in the cancer book, A Threat to Your Life, a chance to take control of your future, Monica was oh so right. It does give you a chance to take control of your future in a way, unfortunately it's being forced to do it, but in a way that we'd never appreciated before. So my approach to all cancers is the foundation is good natural food and natural fat pumpkin. Some people suggest the Gerson diet is probably the best diet of all. You can Google it, Gerson diet. Good natural food, raw, organic if possible, fruit and vegetables, good nutrition. It's important, I think, to take good nutritional supplements to make up for the shortfalls in food that's gobbled up by the cancer cells, and also to superload the immune system. Cancer cells do use a lot of energy, etc., and good shakes and bars can actually help you, because people with cancer often don't feel very hungry. I suggest everybody should take a good multi-mineral and a multivitamin, extra vitamin C at least 3 to 5 to 8 grams per day, extra vitamin D, and fish oils. Now, vitamin D is important if you've got breast cancer. Make certain that the calcium levels aren't high, because vitamin D can make the calcium levels rise. Lifestyle, like Her 90-year-old Majesty, mild exercise is important, but have plenty of rest. Find something worthwhile to do and to contribute. I'm lucky I can write some books and things, but there are things that everybody can do. Read and listen and watch good books and good programs. Enjoy life and appreciate the beauty of the world that we live in. Chemotherapy and radiotherapy, if it's been shown to give benefit, do it. Trust your oncologist, but if you're not sure, get a second opinion. Complementary therapies in the background, research these out, take them continuously, check that they don't affect the chemotherapy. The ones I particularly recommend are curcumin, melatonin, resveratrol, coenzyme Q10. Massage, acupuncture, Reiki, prayer, visualization, yoga. Family and friends, surround yourself with love and fun. Spend time with each of your loved ones, because their support strengthens your immune system and unleash the power of your mind and your spirit. Your intention to beat this thing is the most powerful therapy we have. Be positive, lift up your spirits and admire the magnitude and the beauty of the world that we're in. Never restrict the power of prayer. Miracles do happen. Forgive everybody. If you don't forgive people, any anger and resentment. In fact, it doesn't affect anybody else other than you. Just simply forgive. Be generous. Live a life of love and happiness, and then leave it all to the universe. Don't worry and don't have fear. Now, I hope that's been helpful to some of you. If you've got any comments or any questions, I'd be very happy to answer. That's my email address down the bottom. So God bless you all. Thank you.